something really valuable that you can actually take away and go and implement back into your care environment. Whether you are a home care, I know this is the care home theatre, but whatever you do, hopefully you'll take something away from today that you can go and put into practice. So, we're going to have a look at a few things today. Nature versus nurture when it comes to leadership. We're going to have a look at something called situational leadership, which I appreciate some of you may be familiar with. And we're also going to look at how to motivate your team, which is the worksheet which you have as well, which I'm going to explain a little bit later. And a lot of this that I'm going to talk about today is taken from our forthcoming book, which is called the Care Leaders Handbook. It's not quite out yet, but if you've all been scanned by Bettina when you come in, then you will get notified when the book is available. And that is a really practical guide to leading a care team. It's not the compliance, it's not the regulatory type stuff, it's the soft skills of really how to step into that leadership and role and lead a team and lead the culture. So I'm going to share a little bit from the book today. So, nature versus nurture when it comes to leadership. Who believes that leaders are born? I'm going to ask for shows of hands as well. Do you think leaders are born? Or do you think they're nurtured? So there is some science that shows that some people may be born with certain traits that might make them a good leader. However, just like how your values are developed over time, your leadership capabilities can also be developed over time. So whether you've been a manager for 20 years or whether you're just getting started and you're maybe just a team leader right now, there is always development that you can do, and you can always nurture and develop into a fantastic leader. And I think that this is quite often in care, unfortunately, where we see many new leaders failed by the organisations that they work for. Because what typically happens, and I don't know if you have an experience like this either for yourself or for somebody that works for you, is that people will be promoted to a leadership position, maybe a team leader, maybe a deputy, maybe manager, and whilst they might have all the right skills and experience for the job, they may not have ever led a team before, and they may not have those kind of fundamental leadership strategies and techniques that can actually help them to get the most out of their team. So what typically happens? Well, I don't know if anybody reading this, is anybody happen to be fairly new into a leadership role here? So anybody that's been in a job for maybe 6 months and you kind of stepped up a level, or maybe you might remember what it was like perhaps when you were very first promoted. I remember when I was very first promoted into a team leader position, and what we find is that people default to one of these. I don't know how well you can read the screen at the back, but many new leaders will default to that kind of commanding, right, I'm the boss now, I need to be the boss. So therefore, the natural instinct can be to tell. Do this, do that, this is what needs to be done. And a lot of people think that that's how they can get their authority across, by suddenly becoming that style of leader. We call this the commanding style of leader. And other new leaders, what we frequently see is that they feel very conscious that they've suddenly been promoted above their peers. And they find it very difficult to step into that authority role, and they still want to be friends with everyone. And that can be sometimes a bit of a disaster, because they can end up being taken advantage of. They don't actually exhibit any authority, and people can take advantage of them. So I don't know if either of these are familiar with you, or perhaps you've seen it in somebody that you work with. So why does this happen? So we do a lot of research with our assessment, and some of the things that we measure are well-being type issues within people, and they're all picked up with the Judgement Index assessment. And these are some of the key areas that we find are often for development. Yes, with care leaders, but to be honest, right across the board with all care staff. But what we see in particular is things like a lack of assertiveness, so people do not know how to assert themselves, or they're not comfortable asserting themselves above their team. We also see a lot of self-criticism. How many people here go home and go, oh, I could have done that better, or I should have done that better, or I should have had that conversation better with that member of staff. So we see a lot of self-criticism, particularly with new leaders. And we also see a lack of confidence. And I think confidence is something that we can really develop and have an impact on. And it's something that if you're given some techniques and you're given some strategies that you can go away and practice, then that confidence can grow. And that's what we see with people when we work with them. So the number one lesson really when it comes to leadership is flexibility. To be able to change your style, adapt your style, and be flexible in order to get the most out of the people that you're working with is really key. And I actually had somebody say to me yesterday, oh, I have my style of leadership, and this is the way I like to lead. But leading is not about you. It's never about you. It's about the results that you want to get. It's about the influence that you want to have in order to get the most out of your team. So if you can be flexible and actually adjust your style depending on the scenario, depending on the situation, depending on the motivation level of the people you have in your team, then that will really enable you to get the most out of them. So what you'll find, and if you saw that sort of commanding I am the boss and thought, oh, that's me, maybe not all the time, but maybe sometimes, when you only adopt one style of leadership, you will only ever have an impact on around about 20% of your audience. So 20% of your audience will say, okay, and they'll be happy to be led that way. You're missing out on 80% of the people that you work with. So it's really important to understand, and somebody once said to me, isn't that manipulation? Isn't that manipulating if I'm using one style with one person and one style with somebody else? But if you're getting the best out of your team, and you're really engaging them, and by using different styles of different people, that's allowing you to engage, connect, and actually create movement within your team, then that is the way to lead your team to a better culture overall. So let's have a look at it in a bit more detail, and we call it situational leadership. That ability to be flexible, that ability to read the situation, and the ability to adjust your style as a result. Has anybody come across this before? Is anybody familiar with? It's not a term that we've not invented this. This is from Daniel Goleman's work on leadership. But for anybody not familiar, or maybe a little refresher, let's have a look at it now. So I've already talked about the commanding style, and I've already talked about this affiliative style, which is the friendly, come on, we're all in this together, which can be great, but it can also sometimes lead you to be taken advantage of. Another style, and while I'm going through this, have a think about yourself, and have a think about perhaps not what you'd like to be using, maybe think about what you're using the most right now. What one of these styles do you think you are kind of defaulting to, and are there ever situations where you could actually adjust your style and move into a different style of leadership? Now, the pace setting style is very common in care. If anybody is a leader here, and I will say particularly the nurse leaders that we come across, where you see a lot of the pace setting style, which is do this by this time and this by this time, so there's always a never ending list of tasks to be completed, and I appreciate that care can sometimes be like that. But is it always right? Or actually, is the morale of your team starting to diminish as they feel that they're never actually going to get to the end of what they need to do? So we're thinking about that. The democratic style is all about let's make the decision together. So this may be something you're not really able to do, but sometimes it can result in endless meetings of the leader can sometimes actually want to not take responsibility for decisions that are being made. I'm sure that might not be the case with a lot of you here, because obviously as a leader you do have to make the decisions in care. Maybe endless meetings might be something you see more with, I'll put my foot in it now, but maybe when you're having meetings with local authority and things like that. Sorry if anyone's from local authorities in here. But let's put this into a bit of an example. So the visionary style of leadership could be really, really useful if you have an upcoming CQC inspection. and you have received your PIR, and you know that you need to get all the team together, you need them all on the same path, you want to call a team meeting, and you really want to get across this vision of what you want to achieve. Maybe that's good, maybe that's outstanding. And this would be a great time for you to adopt a visionary style. If you think of Martin Luther King is probably the best example of a visionary leadership, when he held his hand up in the air and said, "I have a dream." Now imagine the impact that that could have on your team if you were to do that for them at this stage. However, if you've looked out of your window in the morning and you can see the CQC inspector walking down the road, it's probably not the right time to be democratic. It's probably not the right time to be affiliative. It's probably the time when things have to happen fast. So you're probably going to step into that commanding style of leadership and say, right, everyone, action stations, the CQC inspector's coming. You need to do this, you need to do this. And that might be the appropriate style at that time. So chuckles here, so I think this is starting to sink in. Now, the only style that I've not really talked about, but potentially the most important style of leadership and the one that has the most dramatic results, is the coaching style. So does anybody here feel, as I'm sort of going through these, that they might have quite a coaching style of leadership? And it's interesting because it's the style that we see the least in care, probably because of time constraints. And to clarify what coaching is, I'll give you an example of a few coaching questions. It's all about being able to help the people that work for you find the pathway for themselves. So it's about being able to ask open questions. It's about being able to let them find the way. And quite often, we find when we're working with care companies, there's just not the time to coach. But it's definitely worth considering, because if you can get into the habit, and I'm not going to talk much more about coaching today, but if you can get into the habit of adopting a coaching style with your team, and some example questions that you might ask in different situations, these very open questions, then in the end it will start to develop a culture of self-leadership within your team. So they will start to learn that they can find the answer for themselves, and that you are going to encourage them to do that rather than be always telling them what to do. And then in the end, this will end up freeing up more of your time. So it's worth thinking about. We do have a leadership styles assessment which will be in the book, where you can actually just fill in a questionnaire. It's just tick boxes, and then it will tell you which style you're using the most. I know some of you are probably sat here thinking, okay, I'm perhaps more this style, or maybe I could sometimes be more this style. But it's definitely worth thinking of, are there times, are there scenarios and situations where you can actually change and flex your style in order to get the most out of your team? Because it's not about you, it's about them. So, moving on, and we're going to have a little look at motivation and engaging staff and motivating staff. And I guess a question for you all is, should we be engaging all of our staff? Should we be motivated? How should we be motivating our staff? Does anybody ever feel like they struggle to motivate their staff sometimes? And I guess another word which I probably should have had on this slide would have been empower. And empower is a word that I hear a lot in the care sector. It can be a bit of a buzzword. So do you think that everybody in your team should be empowered? Yeah? Okay. So what if we've got a brand new member of team, they've just started, and you say, okay, and they've got no care experience, there you go, off you go. Should that member of staff be empowered at that point? Okay. Okay, and maybe they might make a mistake, but there may be times where that is just not appropriate. And the important thing is that if you empower a member of staff to do something where they don't have the skill level or they don't have the willpower, then that can end up failing, but failing to the point where that you could then knock that member of staff's confidence, or you could potentially, have a mistake happen that is serious. So let's have a little look, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about empowerment, and I'm going to tell a story. If anybody listens to the podcast, then you may have heard this story on the 50th episode, but it's just a little story about sausages. So a care manager that I know, we're going to call her Janet for today. She was an outstanding rated manager, and she moved into a new company, a group of homes, and she was starting as a manager there, and she had to sort of put a change program into place. And first few days she's getting on all right, and then she finds out that in order to order sausages, the chef had to write up his order and then get it signed off by Janet. So she had to sign off every single item of food that was ordered to that care home. Does anybody else have to do this? And what struck her was that she was saying, but I'm the manager, I'm not the chef. The chef should be empowered to make his own decision about what quantity of food he's ordered. He's worked here for 20 years. He knows what he's doing. And yet, why is this being given to me to sign off? And she found it really frustrating, and she said that she was actually spending more of her time signing things off and doing paperwork than she was out on the floor doing what she knew to be the right thing to do as an outstanding leader. And it's something to think about. In that circumstance, that member of staff should have been empowered to make the decision by themselves. So I think we do quite often see a lot of this happening in care, where there is just too much micromanagement and too much paperwork. So it might be worth having a think about who you can empower, but also who not to empower, which we're going to have a little look at. So this is something, now you've all got a sheet on this, we'll come to that in a second. This is something called the Skill Will Matrix. I shared this a couple of years ago at this show, and it was something that a lot of people came up to me afterwards and said that they found really useful, so I wanted to bring it back again for this year. Now, with the Skill Will Matrix, it allows you to understand the people within your team and whereabouts they fall in terms of skill and willpower. So if I show you how this works, so let's say you have a brand new enthusiastic member of your team. They're really enthusiastic about care, they really want to make a difference, but they don't really have any experience at all. So their willpower and their enthusiasm will put them towards the top of the page, but the fact that they've not got the skills right now will put them across to this side slightly. So that person's going to go up into this sort of left top box. Is that making sense to everybody? So great willpower, not that much skill, we're going to put them up here. And this is somebody who should be given a lot of guidance. They're going to need guidance to build their confidence, but they're not going to need too much in terms of motivation because they're already highly motivated. And the idea of the Skill Will Matrix is that we can plot all of our team onto this and figure out what we need to do in order to move them into the empowerment box. Because if you have a member of your team who has been there for a long time, who is highly skilled and highly motivated, adopting that commanding style with them of do this, do that, the very direct style, is going to very quickly put their nose out of joint and make them unenthusiastic about you as a leader. So what we need to look at is where all our teams sit. Does anybody have anyone on their team who may have been there for 10, 20 years? I appreciate you don't have to raise your hand for this one. And they are very skilled. They know exactly what they're doing. However, they will not change. They have no enthusiasm. They are stuck in their ways. So they're probably along here on the skill side, but in terms of willpower, you know you're not going to get anything else out of this person. So they're probably going to be somewhere down here. And I'm not going to talk too much about the different techniques in how we actually go about this, but that is somebody that's going to be a very difficult person to change. And it's about how much energy you actually want to put in trying to do that. So let's have a little look at this. Now, you've all got a sheet. You're welcome to take it away with you. Obviously, if you want to start doodling on it right now, you're more than welcome to. And we will also have electronic copies as well. So you've all been scanned, or you're welcome to come and see us on our stand, and we will make sure that we get an electronic copy of this to you so that you can print it and perhaps do it back in the home where you are. So yours looks like this. So we want the people who are highly willed at the top, highly skilled. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if we had a whole team up here? You really would have a lot of free time then, wouldn't you? But you may find, and it's interesting to see whereabouts your people sit. Now, you might want to mark them with their names. You might not want to do it like that. You might want to use code names or initials. You might not want to leave this piece of paper lying around for people to find it. But this is really an exercise for you to really look at where your team are right now in terms of skill level and in terms of their motivation and willpower, and where you might need to put some of your effort and energy into developing your team. Is that clear to everybody? And sometimes it really brings it to life when you put your whole team, especially when you see where they are, because that might make you then think about the leadership style that you're using right now and whether that really is the appropriate style for your team, but for individuals as well. Now, I think something like this, and I know you have to be careful of names with your CQC evidence folder, but even if you had a blank copy in there, and you were able to demonstrate to the CQC inspector that this is something that you're doing to start to understand how to motivate your team, then I think that really goes well against the well-led Chloe for CQC. Anything like this, it shows that you are trying to develop yourself and your team as well. So hopefully that's going to be useful for you. I can see people are scribbling already, so that's nice. Come and show me afterwards if you want. I want to see where your teams are. And really, these sorts of tools, and our book, The Care Leader's Handbook, is full of exercises and strategies and techniques just like this. And if you can give people, particularly your team leaders, particularly the people who are stepping into leadership positions for the first time, that may have never come across any of this stuff, then it can be really, really useful for them to have something that they can then work from. I think a lot of us do think that leaders are just born, and a lot of people perhaps don't realise that you can develop yourself into being a better leader, and that there are tons of different strategies that can help take you there. If you can put some of this into place, it will help build your confidence as a leader, or whoever you're thinking about, team leader-wise perhaps, who help develop their confidence as a leader. But it will also start to create a subtle shift within the company as well. So if you find that you can actually use this, and these are some of our key components, we believe, of a care leader, then you'll start to find that you will have a team who start to adopt that culture of self-leadership. If you can apply that coaching style, you'll start to find that people are able to make decisions for themselves. They start to feel more comfortable that they are being well led, and it will really start to free up your time, and you will develop an entire culture shift within the company. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. There is no band-aid if the culture needs to be changed, but there's definitely steps that we can take to get us there. So, if you would like to talk more to us about some of the things we do, we've got the leadership academies and we've got the workshops that we run for care companies at all levels, and we've also got the book on the way as well, which should be out in the next month or so. I appreciate that's not going to be in time for summer holiday reading, but hopefully for any initiatives starting in September. And if you want to talk more about our research into people working in care as well, and the assessment itself, and we do have some research on outstanding rated managers as well, which is on our website, then please feel free to come and have a chat. But for now, is there any questions at all? Oh, perhaps I'll go back to that one. Is there any questions? I've probably whizzed through that fairly quickly. Anything? The book is not out now. No, if you come over to our stand, we do have a few proof copies that you can have a little flick through and have a look at. Oh, so we are by the catering. So if you know where the coffee stand is towards the back, we're just on the corner, just by the catering. You can have a flick through the book, but it is an unedited version. Somebody did swipe one yesterday, and I thought they're going to read all sorts of grammatical and spelling errors. But feel free to come and have a look. You can look through the chapters and get a feel for what it's about. And if you've been scanned, then you will get notified when the book is available. But it will be on Amazon. Anything else? Any questions from anyone? Yes, Priya. Oh, David. David with the mic.
I'm Priya from Eden Care at Home in Gerrards Cross. Just wanted to make a comment really. We have been engaged with Sophie on hiring and development of recruitment, and we've gone through the assessment process, and I was really, really impressed at the results that came out. It was quite shocking, really, how realistic the assessment was, so I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you very much. Yes, so we've some of Priya's team have actually taken the assessment, and we've been having a look at that, and yes, we've had some interesting and very true results, which can be used for development of existing staff, or when you're hiring staff, it can really help with selection. But also, if you're interested in looking at the well-being side of your team as well, then it's really useful for that. So, okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Do come and say hi. Yeah. Next slide, there we go. And feel free to add me on LinkedIn, connect with me on Twitter. If you want to find more about the podcast, there is a banner just on the right-hand side, just out here, which will show you how to download the